All right, welcome to Patriotic Fest 2025. I'm here with the one and only Tim Jensen, president of the Grunt Style Foundation, and chief branding officer of Grunt Style. Tim, welcome, man.
Yeah, Scott.
Good to be with you again, man. Hey, I wanted to ask, for anybody who's watching that maybe doesn't know Grunt Style or is vaguely familiar with it, how would you describe the movement that is Grunt Style in your elevator pitch?
Yeah, it's a great question, Scott. What I like to tell people is that Grunt Style is the largest patriotic veteran apparel brand in all the lands. And I say that with a bit of pride. We have an incredible team of over 300 individuals, 18 retail stores. We're in over 4,000 doors across the United States in our wholesaling business. We've got a great online business with our gruntstyle.com, our subscription business. We really hit the consumer in almost every aspect of their life with great branding, a lifestyle that speaks to what they find valuable and hold dear, and we do that in a very irreverent way that I think is part and parcel of the military lifestyle.
Sure. Well, I think part of that irreverent is also maybe the highest form of authentic, right?
Yeah.
Of being who we're supposed to be.
Yeah. It's I often think back. I'm 47 years old. My time in service was a long time ago. But I often think about those times in the barracks, right?
Yeah.
And those moments with your bros, right?
Yeah.
Your best friends, and those are some moments that you'll never be able to recreate in life. But I think with this brand, it gets as close as we'll ever be to that feeling of getting people together, bringing that tribe together, celebrating a lifestyle, celebrating patriotism, celebrating this wonderful country that gives us the ability to have these freedoms, and to come to these Patriot Fest like this, where there's Americans, there's veterans, there's all walks of life that are coming here to celebrate in Memorial Day, in the music, and just camaraderie.
Yeah, but, I wanted to ask about your background just quick. What branch of the service were you in?
I served in the Marine Corps.
Okay, all right.
And it was quite the experience.
Yeah. So I'm an Army guy. The thing I can totally concede is you guys hands down have the best looking uniforms.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And then you're continuing that on with Grunt Style, man.
Well, I like to say we look the best and we fight the best.
Because you're my guest today, we're just gonna move right on. No, dude, you guys are badass. I wanted to ask about your guys' involvement in Patriotic Fest specifically, and then I want to really talk about the foundation. So, when did you guys initially get involved in Patriotic Fest?
Yeah, so we got involved about 2 years ago. We were really trying to find a really great venue that speaks to everything we just talked about. We're marketers, we're business people. We're constantly going out trying to find where our people are and provide them an incredible experience. When we heard about this incredible thing called Patriot Fest that was happening in Norfolk, it certainly caught our attention, and we started looking around, seeing what the events have done in the past. And honestly, we ran a brand called Grunt Fest years past.
Okay.
And a little bit more controversial.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
But Pit Fest was really, checking a lot of things that what Grunt Fest was. And that was like bringing like-minded individuals to a place for a period of time to celebrate in this thing called freedom and patriotism, and celebrating good music at the same time.
Right.
And you guys, filled that in spades. And, this is our, going on our third year of being a partner here, title sponsor. And we've had an absolute blast. Is one of those moments that when you round the calendar out, you're like, oh, Pat Fest is coming up. This is going to be a great time, and everybody gets excited for it.
Well, I think one of the things you guys do really well is you bring this energy with you, this unapologetic energy, and I mean, at the base of that energy, I think the one thing that's built on is service, right? And having to look in the mirror and know what service means, and including this weekend what the ultimate service means, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you what Memorial Day really means to you as a veteran, as a business leader, as Grunt Style.
Scott, that is probably one of the most important questions of the weekend. It's like, how do we all think about Memorial Day? In this country, for years we've looked at Memorial Day as the beginning of summer, end of school, the beginning of barbecue season,
right?
Mattress sales, all that stuff, right? But for us, and for me, specifically, I look at Memorial Day as a day of celebration. And I say that differently. A lot of people look at it as a day of remembrance and a day of somberness, and those things are necessary and appropriate. And I do feel all those things on Memorial Day itself. But I think for me, the biggest idea that we should be celebrating is this fact that there are men and women in this country that are willing to raise their hand and die for the ideals and the values of what it represents. That should be celebrated, and should be celebrated on the day of our biggest mourning. The day that we celebrate the lives that have been given for this idea of freedom, this experiment that a couple 20 and 30-year-olds endeavored upon 250 years ago. Yeah. And we're coming up on that birthday, right? 250 years of this experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a moving thing that happened up in the plaza earlier, which is another thing I love about Patriotic Fest. There's so much going on, not just the music. The swearing-in ceremony of 16 young Marines upstairs about an hour and a half ago is moving. We all remember that second we wrote that check, right? Yeah.
It's a special moment, I remember it when I was 17 years old and I did it myself. Actually, I think I was 16 because I was in the delayed entry program.
Oh, okay. I was like, man, there's definitely a waiver on that one. Yeah, right.
But I think I look at my son. My son, I have a 20-year-old son. Was born when I was in Iraq fighting in the war. And he's now a gunner's mate in the Navy, right? An E5. And I look at that and I think of all the years that he watched me struggle with all the things that I've had to deal with post-combat. And it's been a lot, right? It's been a lot. And I can imagine that a lot of people listening to this have had their own struggles and can relate to the things that I'm saying. But to know that through all of that, my son said, you know what? I'm still going to raise my hand because it means something. Yeah. It means something. Man, that's what Memorial Day means to me.
Yeah, well, and I think that we could go 10 levels deep on what that means. I think, especially for a young man, it's a certain rite of passage at a certain point in time for a lot of us, right? In a lot of different cultures, there was always that thing you needed to do from being a boy to man. And I'm not saying the military is the only way to achieve that, but I definitely think it's one of those milestones, right? And helps you walk into manhood. And, I always tell people the Army did much more for me than I ever did for it,
same.
Just discipline and how we live our lives and the places we've gone, the people we've met and seen and experiences. And I just think it's powerful. I think General Patton, and I'll butcher this, sorry, George, was we should not mourn these men, rather we should celebrate the fact that these men once lived.
That's right.
And I really love your spin on the celebration of these souls that were before us and gave it all. I love that. Speaking on these souls and people that give it all, can we talk about Grunt Style Foundation?
I would love nothing more, Scott.
Right on, man. No, I hear you. Give me the elevator pitch on Grunt Style Foundation, just so we have a baseline to start from.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Grunt Style Foundation is an organization built to service the needs of the active duty veteran, or active duty military member, the veteran, first responder, and law enforcement. So with that community, the service community, there is a significant amount of needs from family to mental to physical to health, all these things. Yeah. It's a very dynamic situation for these individuals. So we're here to fill the gap on a lot of those areas. Suicide prevention, food insecurities, mental health and wellness, transition and sustainment, and homelessness. Yeah. Those are really the four areas that we put a lot of our attention. But over the last couple of years, we've really started to see the need to talk about suicide, right? Yeah. I'm very proud of the foundation for a lot of things. We were, involved in key stakeholders in getting the PACT Act passed, right? That was a huge thing when it comes to veterans and, the exposures that we were put in front of in Iraq and Afghanistan and many other countries around the world. That cancer, was killing, and it still is. Just because we passed a law doesn't solve the problem. It's another tool that gives us the ability to service some of these issues.
Yeah.
So, I was really proud about that. Now we need to attack the second biggest problem in our country, and that's the suicides that's plaguing the veteran community and law enforcement and first responders. Here's some staggering data. Over the last 20 years, 25 plus years, 24 years now, over 156,000 veterans have taken their life.
Wow.
156,000. We've, that's in contradiction to the Brown University study that said the number is like 30,133.
Okay.
That's a very exact number.
Yeah.
But that's the number that they're putting out. We know that number is woefully incorrect, and the reason why that is, it's not a feeling. It's not anything other than the simple fact that less than half of the states in this country are required to report suicide to the federal government.
Okay.
Right. So the numbers of suicides, more than half of the country is not reporting. So let's take that. If the numbers are 22 per day on the 12, 13, 14 states that are reporting,
what does that really look like in some of these
30
areas?
plus,
Yeah, man.
Right. So we're thinking that it's 60 to 80 a day. That's the real number. 156,000 over the course of 20 plus years. Coupled with over 68% of the veterans in the current Veteran Health Administration are being prescribed psychotropics, on top of an additional 28% that are being prescribed antidepressants. Wow. So the strategy that's happening within the VHA today is to take individuals that are coming to the program with already suicidal ideations and prescribing them medicine with increased suicidal ideations. So
a bad combination.
Seems like we're peddling these drugs to these individuals, knowing that the outcome is going to be horrendous.
Okay.
Right? That's a problem. And, we're seeing it over and over and over again. Most recently, what put me on this warpath was my best friend. My best friend took his life 2.5 years ago.
I'm sorry.
He went to the VA, like most of us do, when we have a problem or we want to address something. He wanted to address his smoking. The VA has a smoking cessation program that they put out to veterans, right? Come to the VA, we'll get you off smoking, we'll get you on this medicine. Well, that medicine happens to be Wellbutrin. Okay. Wellbutrin is a very dangerous medicine with high suicidal ideations. My friend goes there, says he wants to quit smoking. They put him on Wellbutrin. 4 months later, he kills himself in front of his family with a 12-gauge shotgun. God. Unacceptable.
Yeah.
Unacceptable. Yeah. In that time period, I found 6 other families within the time that my friend took his life that had taken their lives as well on Wellbutrin, that have gone for smoking cessation and given this medicine, and they're taking their lives. So, the bigger question that we need to be asking ourselves is, like, what is the relationship between Big Pharma and the VHA that they're willing to dump these medicines into the medical system, knowing that they're increasing suicidal ideations on top of a patient that is coming with already suicidal ideations? That is like a recipe for disaster. So what are we doing about it? I can sit and bitch about the thing the entire time, right? But that's not going to do anything. Yeah. So we've come together, Grunt Style Foundation, with the VFW and DAV, the American Legion, Wounded Warrior Project, and several other of the Big Six, and many other NGOs across the United States that are involved in veteran issues. And on June 5th, we'll be holding the War Cry for Change Summit. Okay. Where we will be bringing families that have been hurt and harmed by these medicines to the Capitol building in the conference center sponsored by the Office of Senator Moran, where we'll be having a 6-hour summit and talking about the dangers of these medicines, where we hope to expose it in front of the VHA and saying, we have to do better. Yeah. We're going to ask Doug Collins to come and speak. right? We hopefully Senator Moran comes and gives us some of his time. We've got a couple other representatives, senators that will be joining us. Senator Bergman lended his office has coordinated a press conference for us at the Triangle. And then we're going to be having a Reverend Warriors out there as well. So
All right.
it'll start with a Reverend Warriors hike, press conference, and a 6-hour summit.
That sounds like an amazing day.
And then a culminating event where we take our friends at Hempstock are building us a 4x4 hemp skull.
Okay.
And we're going to take all of our prescription bottles with all the pills obviously not in them and make a dramatic expression of throwing all of our pill bottles into this skull in the National Mall on June 5th. So I say to anybody out there that's listening and feels so inclined to join us, you can join us on June 5th in Washington, D.C., starting at 9 a.m. at the Capitol building for a day's worth of adventures and shenanigans.
Well, one of the things that I've always been impressed with you guys and working with Will and Drew in the past and stuff too is it's one thing to sit around and complain about a problem. It's another thing to try to get the voice of those we need to be loudest for in front of people that can actually make a difference. So I know like your work with the PACT Act stuff and I mean some of the other stuff I've seen foundation members do. It's tackling it at the level it needs to be fixed, right? Rather than chasing the ailment, we're kind of going after the cause, and I think that's admirable, and I think it's intelligent and terribly smart.
Yeah.
What other kind of stuff are you guys doing around that mental health piece?
We put a lot of our attention into this, right? Because what we are learning through the science of all of it is that PTSD mimics TBI. Right, so we've been treating a lot of people over the last 20 years with PTSD when it actually has been TBI.
Okay.
Right, which is leading to a lot of other suicides and for misdiagnosis and mistreatment.
Yeah.
So, we do a lot of work around that, most specifically within our Hyperbaric chamber program.
Oh, okay.
So over the course of the last 2 years, we've given out 15 chambers to individual veterans where they're able to take this and get the treatment in the privacy of their own home. So we send them a tube that they get in. We send them the oxygenizer. We send them the condenser. And you can do all this treatment in the privacy of your own home. Whereas if you go out in town, you don't get that same privacy. You're paying anywhere between $150 to $400 a session.
Right.
And it's not very personable, right? Here, you get to bypass all that stuff. You can do it at home. You can do it while watching television. You can scroll and do all the things you want on your phone inside this pressurized unit. And then when you're done, you fold it up and you slide it under your bed.
Right.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Right. And what we've been seeing through all of that is if you treat the veteran with, you treat their inflammation then, leads to pain. Pain leads to addiction. Addiction leads to suicide. Yeah. So if we're addressing and treating the inflammation at the beginning,
right,
then we're not getting allowing the veteran to get into the pain aspects, or we're addressing the pain with non-opioid abatements. Mm-hmm. That person doesn't get into the trap of addictions.
Yeah.
And they're not taking their lives.
Yeah.
Right? So by simply addressing inflammation is having a profound impact on these individuals' lives, especially coming down to talking about that PTSD versus TBI aspect. Now, here's some of the benefits of what the hyperbaric chamber is doing for these individuals. At 1.3, 1.5, and 2.0 ATA atmospheric pressure, the individual is getting hyper oxygenized blood pushed to the furthest extent of their capillaries.
Okay.
So over the course of time, and inflammation that happens within our body, our blood vessels will constrict and will not deliver the full amount of blood or oxygen-rich blood to these areas. Arthritis, all those things that come along with age, right? Because of your deteriorating blood vessels inside, inflammation, which is constricting, vascular, properties. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I'm but it's constricting all these things. And when you're introducing that super rich oxygenated blood to, these areas, it's fleshing it all out. It's opening these blood vessels again. You're getting blood back, and it's actually rebuilding soft tissue.
Oh, wow.
And
All right.
if you think about your brain, that's one big soft tissue. It's mostly cholesterol, right? So by treating the brain and TBI with a highly enriched oxygenized blood, we are rebuilding gray brain matter. We are rebuilding brain synapses.
Wow.
And you're treating the brain in its most fundamental way. And we're seeing people after 40 to 80 dives walking away a much better version of themselves.
That's incredible.
It's incredible, right? But the most incredible thing about this, Scott, is that the VA doesn't recognize this as a valid form of treatment.
Okay.
North Carolina just passed a law a couple of years ago that gives veterans free access to hyperbaric chambers. They produced a study, 144 veterans that went through this program. The study came out in January 2025. Everybody that went through that program, all 100% of them showed better outcomes of their life after the end of that program, and all of 100% of them reported no less than 57% reduction in suicidal ideations. Why is that? Well, because we're treating inflammation. And if we're treating inflammation, we're reducing pain. And we're getting blood to the first parts of the body that it needs it, right? Like our brain.
Right, yeah.
And our toes and our fingers.
And we're not dealing with chronic pain that's leading to addiction, that's incredible. Tim.
It's absolutely incredible. And this is the way forward. I really believe it. I believe that coupled with psychedelic assisted therapy, is a novel way of treating, acute brain issues.
Yeah.
Texas just passed a $50 million law or a funding law this week.
Okay.
For Ibogaine, which breaks addictions, right? And it treatment resistant depression, more specifically. So you're talking that I could take a veteran, put him through one round of Ibogaine that generally lasts between 12 to 24 hours.
All right.
It's not a pleasant experience.
Okay.
But I can give you that session with a 87 to 93% efficacy rate of what it's going to do for you. And you're going to be able to walk away and probably never have to have treatment again. Whereas the traditional methods now is we give you 60 hours worth of talk therapy through a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and these people have no right to be having these conversations.
Yeah.
Right. And a handful of medicines, and hopefully smack on the button, send you on your way, and you're going to be okay.
Well, and one of the things I've seen, and I don't know how to fix it. Right. Well, I have some ideas, but someone showing up to the VA who's already in crisis, unless they are taken into custody, if they're at that point, they're probably going to talk to somebody or be told that we can get you in the next couple weeks. And then even like an SSRI is taking 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks before it takes effect, even if it's going to help.
Yeah.
And then if it's the wrong one, you're ramping down off that, you introduce another one. So we're expecting people to be in crisis for 1, 2, 3, 4 months, just trying to figure out the chemistry of this stuff going. So these, I don't know if they'd be considered more holistic approaches. It's incredible to hear that these can have almost immediate impacts and move things, the needle in the direction we need it to go. Yeah. What are the big hang-ups that are keeping more people from, or more organizations or governments from adopting these things?
Well, it's government.
Okay.
Right? Let's I'll just be completely honest, right?
Yeah.
60 years ago, 70 years ago now at this point, hyperbaric chambers was extraordinarily popular.
Yeah.
Right? And then it went dark all of a sudden.
Really?
Like nobody was offering it. You couldn't find it in hospitals. Off the market. It wasn't until Michael Jackson started doing hyperbaric chambers.
Okay.
Right? Remember that in the late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah.
Everybody's like, oh, that freak is doing HBOT. Oh my God.
He sleeps in this special thing.
Chamber. Right? They tried to make it this negative thing.
Okay.
And then it wasn't really until all the research from CTE on football players to see that damage to the brain that people started saying, hey guys, CTE is real? And we probably should look at some of these veterans that have been blown up, multiple times from IEDs. And, and then they started looking at that and they started seeing correlations, right? That brain damage between football players and military members exposed to explosions are very similar.
Okay.
And then when they started putting them into highly enriched oxygen environments like HBOTs, they started to see that the brain started regrowing itself and those soft tissues started regenerating and all those inflammation and instances started reducing. So, same thing with psychedelics, right? We all know the story, or maybe we don't, but I certainly do. But in the 1950s, when we discovered LSD on an accident, right, and then we started experimenting with it and really understanding what the full capacities and capabilities of this medicine really was. And then it gets banned, and the government starts doing all their secret trials with it, and it leaves the market forever. And the great drug war of the 1970s happens, and you start throwing people in jail.
Please tell me we can get together at some point, go down the MK Ultra rabbit hole on that.
Right?
Time.
Well, think of it this way. Like, in the last 20 years, how many combat veterans, have been put away in prison because of their mental problem, or their acute mental instance, and are now doing 5, 10, 15, 20 years on a TBI issue, which was misdiagnosed as a PTSD issue and has never been treated. So that person is rotting in jail on a moment in time instance, when all we could have done is maybe take a little bit of time, maybe a little bit, applied some science, and said, you know what, this person did that because they have a brain issue that is not being treated. If we treat that issue, that behavior goes away.
Right.
How many of those veterans are locked up in prison because they have TBI and not PTSD?
I couldn't even start to guess.
Thousands.
Yeah, right.
Thousands. And it's not right.
Yeah.
It's not right. And that's why I'm saying, like, these things like hyperbaric chamber, psychedelic assisted therapies, all these different, like red light therapy, like they all work.
Okay.
They all work. But, you got to find the way of applying it. Like, identify what's in your body. Do you have heavy metals in your body? Do you have toxins in your body? Chelate that out. There's certain ways to chelate these things out. Once you get that, then you get into hyperbaric chamber, start repairing your soft tissue. Once you're done with that, if you still are afflicted, then we can look at PAT and all these different modalities that can get you deeper down the way and get you closer to that healing. And that's where we spend a lot of our time in the foundation.
So if someone came across this, where does someone reach out to? How do they get started? Or let's say you have a family member you know is in crisis. Where do they get started at?
Well, the first thing I would say is, when you're in crisis, you got to reach out to the crisis line.
Yeah.
Like, first and foremost, let's get the person out of that crisis moment. Once they're out of the crisis moment, then we can start exploring some opportunities of, like, hey, maybe we should identify what's in your body. Like,
okay.
Do you have some heavy metals in your body? Do you have some toxins? We'll send you to White Plains Laboratories. Tests will get you. We'll identify what's in your body.
Okay.
Once there, then we'll put you into a program to put you on a path. And you can reach out to us at gruntstylefoundation.org for all of that information. Right. We have a contact us feature on that website, and I will tell you, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that reach out to us with that very question alone, saying, how do I get on the path?
Okay.
And we start there and saying, hey, start thinking about what's in your body first.
Yeah.
And then we can start building a protocol to address those things and put you in a better place.
That's amazing. It's moving. if somebody wanted to support all the good work the Grunt Style Foundation is doing, how could they do that?
But several ways.
Okay.
You can go to gruntstylefoundation.org and make a contribution there. Either a occasional donation, a one-time donation, or you can make a recurring donation.
Okay.
We would really greatly appreciate that. You can participate at gruntstyle.com by buying any product and making a financial donation at the checkout. There's a feature there that you could do that. If you go to Grunt Style, any of their 18 retail spots across the United States, you can donate at the point of sale there as well. And we'll be turning on more features and ways of people wanting to, be so generous, if they were, to make those financial contributions. And it's those contributions that help us with the war cry for change. Yeah. For example, right? To put this whole thing on June 5th, it's not cheap. Right. I wish it was free, but it's not. Yeah. So we've raised over $50,000 to make that work.
Amazing.
Through doing these types of conversations and just putting this information in front of the American, because let me tell you, once the American learns what the hell is going on within the veteran community, how all these medicines and modalities are being prescribed to the community that's actually killing them. Once they understand that and they get the science behind it, they're appalled.
Yeah.
And they want to get involved. They want to get up off their couch and get into the fight. And that's what we need. We need more people getting into the fight, because what we can't continue doing, Scott, is allowing these suicides to happen.
I agree.
Right? And that's our responsibility as former warfighters and veterans ourselves, is making sure that we're setting up for the next generation to protect and enshrine this Constitution.
Yeah.
Because that's all we have in this nation is that document that's protecting the wolves from getting in here. I
agree.
Right? Yeah. And all those wolves are government.
Yeah. Right.
Right? That's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
So, I implore everybody, get involved, have the conversations with a veteran, your neighbor, right? We live in a very divisive time right now in America, but, I will tell you this, I am encouraged every day that I get to go out and have conversations with people across this country. I'm encouraged every day that I go out and talk to my neighbors. Because that's America.
Yeah.
It's not the America that the media pushes. It's not the America that the naysayers want us to believe. America is your neighbor. America is the man and the woman that puts on the uniform every day to make sure that the children get to school every day, and that when a fire breaks out, that we're able to put that fire out and nobody is harmed. Or when mom has a heart attack and we have to call 911, that a paramedic shows up on time. That's America.
Yep.
And we have to support that every day. And Scott, as well as I do, that the military is a part is a part of that service. But what some of these law enforcement individuals and first responders and paramedics have to see on the daily. For 20 plus years makes combat look like a walk in the park.
I agree, and I think it's something. Well, the large group of these people are just, villainized over the past, decade or whatever. But I've often thought of that. A police officer from moment to moment has no idea what environment he is walking into. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I totally agree with that assessment of it's another group of people that need us. I can't thank you enough for spending a couple minutes with us here, man. What you do matters. And I'm just grateful to know you, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to let me share a little bit about Grunt Style and the Grunt Style Foundation. You guys put on a wonderful event. Pat Fest is bar none, best in town, best in class. And this is our community.
Yeah.
And getting the opportunity to kind of get them educated on some of the really dark and unsexy stuff that's happening. I don't want to be talking about this. I'd much rather be talking about the 6.5 Creedmoor that I've just bought.
Oh, nice. All right.
I would like to be talking about those things. But unfortunately, those things don't have impact in our community.
Yeah.
And, these are the conversations that do. And we have to, as good stewards and veterans, it's our responsibility. And if it's not, it goes back to that saying, if not me, then who? If not now, then when?
Yeah. Well, I think I want to put a point on this is if you're lonely, or you may be lonely, but you're never alone, please reach out to Grunt Style Foundation or any of these other organizations that are here for you. And we'll get through this together. Tim, thanks for everything, man.
Hoorah.
All right.